Bionicle Adventures 3 The Darkness Below. Written by Greg Farshty. Narrated by Nemetron. Chapter 10. The Tower Metro found themselves dumped on a cold stone floor like so many broken masks. They looked around to see they were in the same chamber where Wenua and now Nuju were held. The creature of smoke had disappeared, to be replaced by the form of Nokama. "I do not like these bodies," the Kraka said. "But Rakshi do not have the ability to speak your language, and I think it only right that you should know your fate." "Why must we be enemies?" asked Vakama. "We came down here only to—" "You came down to invade my home!" snapped the Kraka. "Just like all the other top dwellers with your drills and your scraping tools and your fires. Now I know that as long as there are dwellers up above, there will be no peace here." The Nokama Kraka's right arm suddenly shifted into a long, leather-scaled limb with nasty claws. Have you ever seen the creature this belongs to? No, of course not. This Rahi produces living crystal to weave its nest, a crystal that regenerates when damaged. In a few moments, I will use that crystal to seal off the exits to this chamber. Then, still in Nokama's gentle voice, the Kraka added, "You six will remain here forever." "There is an entire city up there," said Onewa. "Thousands of Matoran. 6 Toa more or less won't stop them from coming down to these tunnels." "But I want them to come," the Kraka hissed. "I want them all to come. Oh, at first I thought I could use your forms to keep them away, but now I realize it's a foolish idea. Better to lure them all down below the surface and imprison them here, then make the land above my new home." The Kraka's body began to shift into the form of a massive, hideous Rahi. As her head changed from Nokama's to the creature's, she said, "You cannot stop me. I have all your powers, all your skills. Accept your defeat, Toa Metru." Fully transformed, the Kraka slithered away to begin sealing the first exit. Nokama turned to Onewa and whispered, "She may be right. She possesses our powers at full strength, while our energies are low." "I might have an idea, but it needs all 6 of us to make it work," said the Toa of Stone. "I can free Nuju, given time, but what about Wenua?" Matao pointed up to where the Toa of Earth was trapped. "I think he is quick solving the problem for us. Look." High above, Wenua had been working on his bonds tirelessly. The combination of his efforts and the intense heat from the protodermis pool down below had weakened the strands until they began to detach from the ceiling. Soon, they would be unable to support his weight. Of course, the bad news was that freedom would send him plummeting into molten protodermis. "And discs left?" Onewa asked Vakama. "1. Not sure what good it will do against the shapeshifter, though. When Wenua falls, launch it. Matao?" The Toa of Air had already readied his tools. At his mental signal, they would carry him into the air. He gestured up, across and down to tell Onewa his plan. "Can your hydroblades crack rock?" Vakama asked Nokama. "Just watch them. Get ready." Wenua had loosed his restraints enough to brace his feet against the ceiling. Now he gave one final shove and tore his bonds loose. The instant he saw the Toa of Earth begin to fall, Matao rocketed into the air. Vakama loaded and launched in one smooth motion. The disc struck the Kraka and unleashed its power to reconstitute at random. The Rahi bellowed with rage as her body went through multiple changes at once, arms and legs shifting rapidly from one form to another. Onewa and Nokama moved so fast it almost looked as if they had been hurled from a launcher as well. They vaulted over the protodermis pool and struck Nuju's stone prison as one. Onewa's knowledge of stone served him well, as his proto-pitons found just the right weak point to hit. The rock cracked down the middle and fell apart, freeing the Toa of Ice. Up above, Matao caught Wenua before he had fallen too far. Rather than fight to stay aloft carrying the extra weight, the Toa of Air went into a power dive, heading right for the Kraka. But the Rahi spotted the danger and used Vakama's powers to throw up a wall of flame in their path. The Toa of Fire had no time to think, only to act. He flung out his arms and strained to absorb the fire into him. If he failed, Whenua and Mata were doomed. Nokama, Onawa and Nuju watched from the other side of the chamber, knowing they were helpless to aid him. Mata and Whenua were only seconds from plunging into the flames. Where Vakama found the strength of will, he would never know. But suddenly the flames began to whirl like a cyclone and shot across the room into the tower of fire. Glowing with power, he unleashed them again at the wall behind the Kraka, blasting it into rubble. "Try sealing that up," he shouted. Rattled by the explosion, the Kraka could not get out of the way of the diving tower, but she transformed by reflex into a gelatinous creature, and Whenua and Matau shot right through her and landed hard on the floor. The Kraka shifted again, this time into a purple Rakshi, then let out a scream. The force of the yell knocked the tower off their feet. Vakama, drained from his efforts against the wall of flame, flew halfway across the chamber. Matau and Whenua tried to rise, but a second scream slammed them into the wall. The Kraka's form changed once more, this time into the shape of Vakama, but she was clearly beginning to tire. "You have no idea what you are dealing with," she said. "There are things down here, things I have seen, that dwarf your power. If I become one, I could down you all with one blow and then crush your city." Vakama saw the Rahi wearing his form and heard the words coming out of his mouth. His rage overcame his weakness. He rose and began striding across the chamber towards the Kraka. "Then do it," he shouted. "Show us your power if you can." Nokama started forward. "Vakama," Nuju blocked her path. "No, let him speak. While her attention is on him, we can help Mata and Whenua. Then the Toa Metru will stand united." "And we know how much you like that," Onawa said, smiling at Nuju. "It has its place," Wall as the Toa of Ice said. Vakama had not slowed in his march toward the Rahi. The Kraka took a step backward, saying, "You think you can stand against my power? You are a fool, Toa of Fire. And you are a thief," snapped Vakama. "Not a conqueror. Just a pathetic creature who survives by stealing the might of others, because she has none of her own. Maybe you started out wanting only to protect your home, Kraka, but it has made you into a monster." The other Toa had thought Vakama was only trying to distract the Rahi, but as they moved to surround her, they saw he had not even noticed them. His attention and anger were focused on her, and hers on him. The Kraka shouted something in a language none had ever heard and launched beams of fire and ice at Vakama. Amazingly, he did not even try to dodge. It was as if the emotions inside him were acting as a shield against her powers. "You may defeat us all," he said. "You may defeat every Matoran and every Vaki in all of Metru Nui. But you will not do it looking like a Toa. You will not shame what a Toa stands for, or one who has fallen to protect our city. That I swear." The Kraka looked around, finally noticing that the other 5 Toa were closing in, but she showed no fear or hesitation. Instead, she laughed and said, "Not as a Toa? Very well then." Now began the most amazing transformation of all. Before the horrified eyes of the Toa Metru, the Kraka grew and changed into a walking nightmare. No longer was she Vakama, or any single Toa. Now she towered above them as a frightening combination of all 6. A fearsome face smiled down at them. 6 arms slowly waved in the air as she grew accustomed to her new form. "Do you like this better, little ones?" she said, her voice the mingled tones of all the Toa Metru. "There is an exhibit for the archives librarian," said Onawa. "I don't think she will fit," Whenua replied. "Outside of running away, anyone have any good ideas?" "Spread out," said Vakama. "Let's not make it easy for her." "Are we escaping?" asked Whenua. "No," answered Nuju, as he readied his crystal spikes. "We are ending this." "Ah," said Mata, arrow slices in his hands. "Well, I had no thought plans for today anyway." The Kraka watched with amusement as the Toa Metru took up positions around her. Every move she made in her new combined form filled the Toa with revulsion. But it was Nokama who first took a step forward. "Beware, Toa of Water," rumbled the Kraka. "Even you cannot withstand Vakama's flames." "No, I can't," Nokama agreed. "Can you? You have gone too far, Kraka. I think you know it too. If you have our power, don't you have our wisdom as well? Does this have to end in battle?" "Yes! You must fall. The mask makers must be driven from the sculpture fields. The knowledge crystals must not fly through the chutes. And the exhibits, they must be purified and stored so that the canals can flow." The Kraka swayed as the images and knowledge derived from 6 minds flooded her own. For a moment it seemed as if it would be too much, and Nokama was certain victory was at hand. But the Kraka's will was too strong. She steadied herself again. "You would have lived out your lives here, safe from harm," the Kraka said, raising all 6 of her arms. "But now..." The Toa Metru knew what was coming. Their only hope was to move fast. Together, the heroes of Metru Nui charged. Raw power surged from within the Kraka. Bolts of ice and fire, storms of earth and stone, whirlpools of water and air rained down on the Toa. They struggled to make headway against their own power, only to be driven back. With their full energies, they might have achieved the stalemate. Weakened as they were, it seemed they could not win. Vakama, half frozen by Nuju's power, glanced up at the Kraka. He expected to see a creature aglow with triumph as she drove the Toa down, but instead the Kraka looked as if she were about to collapse. "Keep struggling," he shouted to the other Toa. "Don't give in." The Kraka unleashed more and more power. One by one the Toa Metru fell before the onslaught, only to somehow find the strength to rise again. The Kraka's fury grew greater every moment, but all her might could not make the Toa surrender. Far below, the Toa struggled for their very lives. Nuju battled to make headway against raging winds. Nokama leaped and dodged white-hot fireballs. Matao battled stones away with his arrow slicers. Vakama pressed on through a howling blizzard. Onawa fought to overcome tidal waves of earth, as Whenua did the same with water. The Toa of Water realized there was no way to overcome the Kraka with sheer might. The only hope for victory lay in striking out at the Rahi's willpower and weaken her from within. "I hope you win," Nokama shouted at the Kraka. "It will be the fate you deserve." The Kraka's attack did not slow, but she regarded the Toa with puzzlement. Nuju guessed Nokama's plan and decided it was a good one. "She's right," he shouted over the wind. "At least if we are trapped here, we will be together. You will be alone for eternity, Kraka." Nokama barely dodged the hottest fireball yet. "I've seen how the Rakshi are around you. They fear you, just like everything else down here. They know you for a deceiver." "The Rahi will flee Metru Nui," Onawa added. "You will be the absolute ruler of nothing." The Kraka did not take this suggestion well. She began combining her powers in one blast, using earth and water to bury Onawa in a sea of mud. Nokama needed all her agility to avoid molten rock. Vakama faced a blizzard of snow, ice and stone. "We will build a new city home down here," said Matao. "But even in the sun's light, monster, you will always be in night dark." "You are trying to confuse me," bellowed the Kraka. "It will not work." Whenua could see she was lying. Better still, she was expending huge amounts of power as she grew more agitated. Onawa had told him something of how the Kraka used his form to fool the Toa, so Whenua decided it was time for payback. Fighting the crushing might of the water, he bent down and activated his earthshock drills. Their sound could not be heard over the winds in the chamber. He swiftly dug a hole and dove into it, followed by the waters. If he was right, the maneuver would shake the Kraka up even more. If he was wrong, there would only be 5 Toa left to fight. The massive Rahi noticed immediately that Whenua was gone. "Where? Where is the Toa of Earth?" she demanded, casting her eyes about frantically. The stone floor behind the Kraka exploded. Wunua's head emerged from the hole. "Surprise!" he yelled. "See what a real tour of Earth can do, not some cheap imitation." Wunua vanished underground again. Enraged, the Kraka melted the stone around the hole, all the while continuing to fend off the other 5 Toa. Down below, the Toa of Earth fought to hold his breath as his drills carved through the stone. If he was right, the Kraka was just above him, and about to get a shock. The Kraka felt the ground give way beneath her and struggled to keep her balance. She would not fall before these interlopers. She would crush them here and now, and then all top dwellers, and she would rule above. But who would she rule? Mindless Rahi? And what would she have them do? No, it didn't matter. They would obey her commands. And her first command would be to... But what if they all fled at her approach? Then she would stop them. She would imprison them in the city, just like she had done the top dwellers. She would cage everything that existed. Only that way could she be sure of her own survival. As her inner debate raged, the Toa were able to make progress against her weakening powers. Onuwa could sense that the end was near. If only one more event would push her over the edge. He signaled for the Toa to move closer together and form a wedge, forcing the Kraka to focus maximum power on one spot. Reacting to their maneuver, the Kraka pointed her 6 arms all in one direction and brought the power bursts near to each other. At the crucial moment, Wunua tore out of the ground behind her, his shout of rage breaking her concentration. The elemental energy she wielded merged together in that one instant into one awesome blast. The Toa narrowly dug the power beam. Only Vakama turned to see that where he struck, a new substance had formed, one that looked like solid protodermis. How could that be? He wondered. Is that what would result if we combined our powers? Maybe... Vakama, watch out! Nokama shouted. Then, without warning, the power ceased to flow from the hands of the Kraka. The giant Rahi staggered and fell, slamming into the ground with such force that surely all of Metronui must have trembled. She lay still, her body slowly beginning another transformation, but into what, none could tell. Vakama approached the prone form. She still lives. Trying to use all our powers at once overwhelmed her. It's over. For now. Yes, for now, said Nokama. But what cage could hope to hold a creature that can transform at will? The Onomatoran can put her in stasis, offered Wunua. She can be kept in the archives until it is safe, someday, to release her. And if there are more like her down here, said Onawa. That is the Toa of Stone, said Mato. Always with the happy cheer. No, groaned the Kraka. No. I will not be chained. The Toa whirled to see their opponent had shifted to the form of a lava eel once more. Only Vakama was close enough to stop her, but he did not move as she plunged into the pool of molten protodermis. The others ran to the edge of the pool, but there was no sign of her. Why didn't you stop her? Demanded Onawa. You just let her go. She fought to protect her home. But too much power, fueled by too much anger, made her a menace, Vakama said quietly. Perhaps I saw a reflection of ourselves in her, of what we could become if we are not very careful. Onawa threw up his hands. Someday I will figure you out, Fire Spitter, but not today, it seems. Nokama stared at the molten pool for a long time. Had Vakama done the right thing? The Kraka was no unthinking beast, but she did have a great deal to learn before she could live in peace with others. Still, could any being hope to master such lessons in a cage? The Toa of Water could not say for sure, but one question more haunted her. With its power to change shapes, if the Kraka did survive and someday returned, how would they know? End of chapter 10.